The hypocrisy of Emma Watson. Hypocrisy can be evidenced by anybody, narcissists and non-narcissists alike. However, it is particularly prevalent in respect of the behaviour of narcissists for the following reasons. First of all, the narcissist, driven by their mentality that they are the most important person in the universe, always believes that they have an opportunity to speak, that whatever they say is noteworthy and important. And this sense of entitlement invariably leads them to pronounce on matters where perhaps they would be better keeping their mouths shut. Furthermore, allied with the lack of accountability that comes with the narcissist, this provides a mobility in what the narcissist says and does, whereby they can, through their sense of entitlement, say something and then row back from what they had said, denying that it ever occurred or was said, because of that need for a lack of accountability. It also means that because they can say and do what they want, they can further say and do what they want, meaning they can do A and then they can do B, and they can both be diametrically opposed, and the narcissist doesn't see any problem with that. Throw in the absence of emotional empathy and the grandiosity, it makes for a heady brew whereby the narcissist is allowed to do whatever they want, even where they contradict themselves, and they simply do not care because they are not burdened by a moral compass, a sense of guilt, or conscience. It's also the case that hypocrisy arises as a consequence of the pursuit of the prime aims, aided and abetted by the qualities that I've just described. For instance, in order to assert control over a particular group of people, that narcissist then states something along the lines of how they're going to be involved in environmental activity, that we need to cut emissions, that there should be wide-ranging and hard-hitting measures put into place. The audience loves this. They're environmentalists, and therefore their cheering and applause and approval for what the narcissist has just said means that they demonstrate that they are under control and providing fuel. That narcissist who has just given a speech about environmental concerns then needs to be somewhere else. As a consequence of that necessity, so that they can then go and assert control over another audience and do so promptly, they clamber into a private jet. They've just spoken about protecting the environment and cutting emissions, and there they are getting into a private jet, which many would deem would be totally unnecessary. But the narcissist can do what they want. They don't see the contradiction, or if they do, it's justified in their mind. And because of the necessity of controlling that crowd by talking about environmental concerns, and then the necessity of getting to the next appointment promptly in order to be able to assert control over another group, the narcissist utilizes a private jet, demonstrating their hypocrisy. But the compartmentalization and blinding effect of the narcissism means the narcissist can do this. It means that the narcissist could preach about family values, how that society has become all the more deviant and debauched, and something must be done. This goes down well with the audience, who praise this particular politician for taking a moral stance, trying to halt the degeneration that is seen amongst society. That's done, of course, to control that audience and draw fuel from them and to manage a facade. That night, the politician is engaged in a sex orgy, which happens to be uncovered by the press. He's married, and he's found with a Black Mambo vibrator shoved up his yitter whilst he's being writhed upon by 3 prostitutes. So much for family values. Again, the hypocrisy. Why? Earlier on, it was necessary to talk about family values and preventing a debauched society because it asserted control over the audience and drew fuel from them. It enabled him to manage the facade. Later, in order to draw fuel, to control the individuals that he's with, and gain the residual benefit of pleasure, that politician engages in a sex orgy. Once again, hypocrisy. Accordingly, the various traits that I mentioned earlier, combined with the necessity, the expeditious behaviour in the pursuit of the prime aims, results in narcissists frequently being hypocrites. And we have an instance of Emma Watson, who is familiar to you as the former Harry Potter actress, who J.K. Rowling described as being ignorant of her ignorance, which is a very apt observation for somebody who has grown up in the rarefied atmosphere of always having wealth and privilege. Here we have numerous instances of the hypocrisy of Emma Watson, which tells its own story. First of all, Emma Watson, a vocal feminist and UN Women Goodwill ambassador, posed topless for Vanity Fair's March 2017 issue to promote the film Beauty and the Beast. She was then accused of hypocrisy for sexualizing her own image while campaigning against the objectification of women through initiatives like He for She, arguing that it undermined her message on gender equality. Accordingly, this rather conceited and know-it-all individual preaches about gender equality, rails against the objectification of women, and then goes and engages in sexualizing her own image. In a 2014 interview, Watson criticized Beyoncé's self-titled album for lyrics that she said objectified women and reinforced patriarchal norms. However, after her own revealing Vanity Fair shoot that I've just mentioned in 2017, Watson then defended Beyoncé as a feminist icon. Again, an inconsistency with regard to her stance on female empowerment versus sexual expression. During the height of death and torture threats against J.K. Rowling over her gender-critical views, Watson publicly amplified criticism of Rowling via social media and speeches. Yet, she sent a private handwritten note saying, "I'm so sorry for what you're going through," which Rowling later described as a hollow gesture that ignored Watson's role in fueling the backlash, exposing a disconnect and the hypocrisy between her public activism and her supposed private remorse. Rowling publicly called out Watson for advocating gender identity policies that Rowling argues erode women's sex-based rights, for instance, single-sex spaces in shelters, prisons, and hospitals, while Watson's multimillionaire status, earned from Rowling's Harry Potter series, insulates her from these realities. The fact is that she has never faced many of these difficulties, yet then positions herself as a women's rights expert. How so? When she continues to advocate positions which erode the rights of women. Another example of her hypocrisy is that as a UN Women Goodwill ambassador promoting fair economic policies in developing countries, she set up an offshore company in the British Virgin Islands to purchase a £2.8 million London property, legally avoiding £880,000 in stamp duty taxes. Whilst she is allowed to do this, and it is legal, the fact is that on the one hand you're bleating about fair economic policies, and then you're not paying the tax that you could have done, as it mirrors the tax evasion tactics she implicitly criticised through her global equity work, prioritising personal wealth over systemic fairness. Watson has advocated for climate action, attending COP26 in 2021 and supporting sustainable initiatives. However, she has been named among celebrities with high carbon footprints from private jet use, including flights emitting far more CO2 than commercial travel. Once again, the exhibition of elite hypocrisy, lecturing the masses on emissions reductions, while her lifestyle contributes disproportionately to the crisis that she condemns. At the 2022 BAFTAs, Watson accepted an award for Little Women with the line, "All Witches," which is interpreted as a jab at Rowling's gender-critical stance. Rowling viewed this as performative activism from someone leveraging the Harry Potter franchise for clout, only for Watson to later claim in interviews that she loves and treasures Rowling, revealing opportunistic inconsistency in their feud. Watson's He for She campaign focused on engaging men in feminism, but was criticised for centering white Western experiences without adequately addressing race, class or global South issues. Despite later acknowledging this, her high-profile roles, for instance the UN speeches, continued to prioritise broad appeals over marginalised voices, leading to charges of performative allyship that benefits her image more than diverse women. After backlash for her Vanity Fair pose that I mentioned earlier, Watson stated feminism is about giving women choice and dismissed critics as using feminism as a stick to beat other women with. Detractors pointed to her earlier disapproval of similar choices by artists by applying standards unevenly. In fact, she was empowering when it suits her, judgmental when it doesn't, undermining her inclusive feminist rhetoric and once again exposing her hypocrisy. Watson has used her platform to critique figures like Rowling on trans rights, framing it as compassion. But Rowling has noted that Watson's wealth affords her single-occupancy bathrooms with guards, shielding her from the policy fallout she endorses, for example, male-bodied individuals in women's prisons. This elite detachment allows risk-free virtue signalling, contrasting sharply with the vulnerabilities faced by everyday women that she claims to champion. There are other instances of the hypocrisy of Emma Watson, but there are just 10 examples demonstrating that this individual regularly behaves in a way whereby she will say one thing and do another, exhibiting her sense of entitlement, her lack of accountability, that she claims to care, but then doesn't appear to demonstrate that through her actions. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.